I'd like to welcome you all to the 8th Annual Lafayette Health Awareness Forum. And my name is Al Hayashi. This is a recent picture of me. And as you know, the forum's goal on an annual basis is to present contemporary and relevant health topics to the community, and to provide you with information and also some insight as to how we can lead our lives in a health and wellness standpoint. So welcome. There is a saying that your body takes care of you for the first 30 years, but thereafter, you need to take care of your body. Now, this is a computer-generated thing, but it is a little scary, and it hits home. And there's no doubt that we live longer, but the question is, how can we live better? And if you see in this community, you'll realize there are octogenarians and people who are retired leading a fantastically healthy life. And some of us wonder, how do they do that? How is it that they can enjoy life in all its splendor? And so we need to know what they're doing. And we have experts. We've found experts who actually can tell us that. Tonight, we're in for a real treat. We have 3 engaging speakers, and they will present to you their research, their knowledge, and their experience that's compelling, and I hope will help to change your lifestyle to the positive. Our first speaker is Dr. Scott Hofer. He's professor of psychology and holds the Harold Moore and Wilhelmina Moore Research Chair in Adult Development and Aging at the University of Victoria. His research focuses on finding early signs and predictors that lead to future changes in mental function and health. He is interested in studying the dynamics between the psychological and physiological processes using intensive measurement designs. He's the program director of the Integrative Analysis of Longitudinal Studies on Aging Research Network. That was a test for me to say, so I'm not demented. This is an international organization that looks at how age and changes in health affect mental function and well-being. He's a fellow of the Canadian Academy of Health Sciences, American Psychological Association, Gerontological Society of America, and current president of the Society of Multivariate Experimental Psychology. And Scott's presentation on Is Aging Well Today Matters. Scott.
Good evening, everyone. I first just want to thank the quartet and Al. It has been such a pleasure to meet these people and to work to plan this meeting. It is just such an honor to be here. Thank you so much. Well, what I'd like to do tonight is tell you a little bit about what we do in the area of cognitive aging, and talk about the variety of ways that we come to understand the types of changes we see, and more importantly, the kinds of modifiable factors that we can all do to optimize these health and cognitive outcomes later in life. Cognitive aging really focuses on changes in memory, in reasoning, in your speed of processing, in all the things that go into kind of complex thinking. Some very basic questions have been looked at, and some of these still have not yet been answered. For example, we still really don't know when we reach, on average, peak cognitive ability. At what point in the lifespan do we operate at our maximum? So the converse of that is, when does cognitive decline begin, or after what period of stability do we begin to see changes, and why? But more importantly, tonight I want to focus on whether that in fact many of these changes we see are reversible and can be prevented or modified. So what I'd like to do tonight, and I'll start with my conclusions here, or kind of a guide of where I want to take you quickly, is I want to describe what we've learned from several different kinds of studies about the kinds of modifiable factors that influence cognitive and physical capabilities later in life. I'll talk first about longitudinal studies. These are often long-term studies where we follow the same people and we go in and we measure them about every 2, 3, 4 years over long periods of time. And we're able to then understand their patterns of change, but more importantly, what causes those changes and why do people differ? The second type is, I'm just going to touch on briefly, is comparison of birth cohorts. There have been remarkable changes historically within our societies across people born in different birth years. So people born in the late 1800s differ from those people born in the early 1900s to 1940 to 1950 and on. I'll tell you a little bit about some of those findings and why it's important for our studies of aging. And finally, I want to tell you about some of the most exciting work that we're currently doing, and that is measuring people more often, measuring people every day for a period of days, and what we're learning from that kind of design. And the most important thing I want you to take home tonight is that the kinds of findings the kinds of things that we learn from these long-term longitudinal studies to these studies that compare people born in different years to these daily diary studies converge to tell us that engaging in physical activity, first and foremost, but also social engagement, intellectually engaging activities, all matter for your cognitive functioning, for your health, and for your well-being. So the idea here is that aging well is something that we all really must do on a daily basis, that we see these outcomes within that day, but they matter over the long term. That's really what I want to end up with. I'll mention that I'm director of this IALSA network. This is a network that's comprised of many different longitudinal studies from around the world, sampling people born in the late 1800s up to more recent times, born in the 1950s, 1960s. These are studies of aging. So we really want to capture what kinds of changes have occurred to these individuals. Some of these studies start when they're infants, and now these people are 65 or 70 years of age. So we really have these lifespan opportunities to understand the kinds of factors, the kinds of lifestyles and activities that matter most for maintaining your functioning later in life. So what we're doing within this network is bringing these studies together to ask the same questions and to then compare results across these different countries and birth cohorts and so on. Very exciting, and this is something we're engaged in right now. Now, from these studies and from other studies, we find that there are a number of factors that are associated with cognitive change. So basically, why some people show stability much later in life, and some people show some declines. And many of these are due to health conditions. Certainly cardiovascular disease, diabetes, depression, these things are all related. What decreases this risk, however, are things like physical activity, the amount of time you spend in cognitively engaging activities, the kinds of social networks and social interactions you take part in, your diet. Educational attainment is a protective factor for later life intelligence, as well as socioeconomic status and cognition as a child. So we see this complex set of risk factors that all seems to matter, often to rather small degrees, but they all add up and they combine in important ways. But the most significant one is physical activity. This is seen most consistently across these studies and has the most powerful effects. There's been a number of summary reports, one by Herzog. The available evidence favors the hypothesis that maintaining an intellectually engaged and physically active lifestyle promotes healthy cognitive aging. And we see that in a variety of types of activities, aerobic, non-aerobic, weightlifting, brisk walking, running, swimming, dancing. There's a variety of things, and you'll hear more from my colleagues Stuart McDonald and Sam later on. We also find some evidence, it's much more mixed though, about the intellectual engagement. It's really physical activity that shows the most profound and robust effects. We've just completed an article that showed this across 4 of these longitudinal studies. The main finding was that it's really your physical activity at the same time that we measure your cognition. So it's not as if 5 years ago you were physically active and now you're not. It's maintaining that activity that has these kind of immediate effects that carry forward. And other types of designs, this is from a summary of randomized clinical trials. So this is where people are assigned to do exercise for perhaps 6 months, and then they're compared with people who did not change their exercise habits. And this just shows very, very strong effects for these exercise programs and being engaged in aerobic activity 3 days a week for a period of 3 or 4 months or 6 months on all types of cognitive abilities. So this is a design that allows us to make a clear causal statement that physical activity has an important impact in improving your cognitive functioning. So these are the kinds of results that we see from these long-term longitudinal studies and also from clinical trials, those studies that have been done. They're relatively few. I want to kind of jump gears now and go back to this question of when does aging-related cognitive decline begin? And I mentioned that we don't have a good answer, and we don't have a good answer because it depends on how you look at it. When we compare people of different ages, this is a cross-sectional study, what we find is that younger individuals in their 20s and 30s perform the best. And really it's after age 25, 30 that we begin to see these age differences. So that from these kinds of studies, we would see that that's where peak cognition occurs in the lifespan. But when we follow people longitudinally, the same person over time, we find that that's not the case. What we really see is that if there are declines, they're much, much later in life. So we really get two different kinds of results from the cross-sectional age comparative design from the design that follows people over time, over long periods of time. Now, why is this? I mean, this has been a major problem, and it's still unresolved, and we have people arguing both sides. Well, I think that one big reason is because there have been these remarkable cohort-related differences across the last 80 to 100 years. This has been called the Flynn effect, after James Flynn, a political scientist out of New Zealand. And what he did was that he looked at individuals aged about 20 years from successive birth cohorts. So 20-year-olds born in 1920 compared to 20-year-olds born at 1930, compared to 20-year-olds at 1940, and so on. And what he saw was a very consistent increase in performance on intelligence tests, on a variety of intelligence tests. So that's basically saying that we are seeing increases in IQ, or intelligence, across the last 80 years in people of the same age. So we're keeping that constant. That's remarkable. And that's maybe not too surprising because we see these same trends in birth weight and in height and in lifespan, life expectancy. So we've seen certainly a number of things occur over the last century that have really mattered for all kinds of health-related outcomes. Now, we don't really know, it's very unlikely that there's any one single thing that's causing this. There's a variety of things, and the potential causes have been changes in schooling. So early in the century, it was maybe much more about rote memory, and now it's maybe more about concepts and working through problems. I don't know to what extent that's true, but that's been argued. The idea that we all take more tests, we're all more familiar with that, current day rather than 40, 50 years ago. Increases in cognitively demanding professions. Nutrition. Nutrition's probably a big one because we see these secular trends in height as well. And leisure activities and decrease in family size, more time spent with children, this kind of thing. But the idea is it's a robust phenomena seen across many different Western countries, and now we're seeing it begin to occur in developing countries like Africa, where we're seeing these major changes in IQ. The important point here that I wanted to bring out is that this kind of design is quite interesting because it actually explains those between-person age differences I showed you earlier, where the conclusion is that cognitive decline occurs much earlier in life. Well, that's not the case if you take this into account because it happens that older adults that we compare to were actually born in earlier generations. The younger adults were born in later birth cohorts. And that's really explanatory. So these kinds of shifts we've seen in society that has increased IQ and height and health outcomes probably account for some of these differences as well. But are we really getting smarter? And I would say no, right? This is important. This is really important because if you really took this seriously, then an individual who was in the top 10% of the population, they were the top best scorers 100 years ago, they would now be in the bottom 5% today. And that just doesn't make sense, right? So there's something going on here for sure because we are seeing these real increases on average. And I think what's really happening here is that a greater proportion of the population is exposed to all of these positive factors, and it's had a real impact on our society. So when we talk about these estimates, these are really population estimates. More of us are benefiting from these clear societal trends. So that's an important point. And these are the kinds of things we kind of struggle with in our studies of understanding change with age. Now, in this latter part of my talk, just a few more minutes here, I want to jump into talking about how we vary from ourselves within and across days. So I've talked a little bit about these population trends. So what happens on average in a population? And we've seen these improvements across successive generations. My earlier comments about the kinds of risk and protective factors associated with aging really have to do with individual differences, how we differ from one another, why one person ages maybe a little more optimally than someone else, and what kinds of things might account for that. So there we're talking about individual differences. Now I want to talk about within-person differences, how we vary over time. So I think we all have, I know I have good days and bad days. Some days where I'm really sharp, I can accomplish a lot. Some days it's a little more difficult. And I can try to understand what that's related to, but these are what we do is we've begun a series of studies where we measure people more frequently. We measure them once a day, at the end of the day, on a whole set of different types of measures. This is one study, the UVic well-being study, where we really wanted to understand individual differences and within-person variation in a whole variety of measures of well-being. And so what we did was we asked people to fill out a survey every night for a period of 14 days. This is the life satisfaction scale, just to give you an idea of what we do when we measure well-being. This is a well-used scale in a variety of research studies, but not so much in studies like the daily diary study that I'm going to show you here. So here we ask questions like, my life is close to my ideal, the conditions of my life are excellent, my life is close to how I would like it to be. So we kind of get these assessments of how satisfied a person is with their life. Now we modified this for a daily assessment. So the way we phrased it was, in the last 24 hours, and you can see how we just varied it a little bit, I felt satisfied with my life. So we're asking now for an appraisal of your day. This is just a series of plots showing 10 different individuals. The red line is their score on the life satisfaction scale as it's normally given, as a scale that's retrospective. And then what we show are the scores on that same scale modified for daily assessment. And what you see is quite a variety of patterns. So this individual, their life satisfaction scale was pretty much what we got when we took the average of their daily assessments. But you can see that there's quite a lot of daily variability in those assessments, so that on some days they were very high in their life satisfaction, and on some days, particularly one day, very low. Some individuals showed much less variability than other individuals day to day. And this is what we see on a whole variety of different scales. When we look across, so well-being is a complex topic. There are many different types of well-being. And here, we can talk about personal growth or your purpose in life, your relatedness or how the relationship quality, self-acceptance, engagement, vitality, positive and negative affect, a variety of ways. And all of these are somewhat distinct. They tap something a little different. But the point is here is that each individual shows a lot of variability day to day, that not every day is the same. And it's impacted in a variety of ways. What we find is that stress, the quality of sleep you had last night, your physical activity, all of these are dynamically related day to day. Now, one of the most exciting projects that I've been a part of, and this is a very recent one, I hope you'll have a chance to meet Amanda Kelly. She's a graduate student working with me. We have a couple of posters out there. But we've been working with doctors Eric Shafansky and Al Hayashi on including these kinds of measures and patient-reported outcomes within a physician practice to see what additional information might be useful, both for the client, the patient, as well as for the physician. And so we began just a pilot study to evaluate some of these things and do this within a web-based patient portal. We included a variety of health measures, sleep hours and quality, physical activity, well-being, number of stressors and types of stressors. And I'll just show you a few quick results. We'll have more time out there, I hope, to talk about some other results. But what this plot shows is the measurements across 7 days. This is your well-being score in terms of positive affect here. And what we show is that on a day where a person is physically active, their well-being is higher. All right? And this is all within person. This is relative to themselves. So on a day a person goes out for a walk or does some form of physical activity, their well-being is consistently higher than on days that they don't. We also find that experiencing a stressor affects well-being. Maybe not a surprise, but it's nice to see a very robust finding in a variety of studies. And what we see also is that physical activity can dampen the effect of a stressor. So it has less effect on your well-being on days that you're more physically active. So these are I just wanted to kind of bring this kind of design to you to talk about some of these results that we get. Here we show that on a variety of measures of health, that people also vary in terms of their ratings of different types of health. And on a day where health is above average, the positive affect is also much greater, and it's highest for the scale of physical functioning and also for energy vitality than it is on a day shown here by the blue, where you have a below average health day. So we see also these links, these dynamic links between stress and health and physical activity and well-being. So just to close, aging well today matters. We really see consistency across these different results, from these long-term longitudinal studies to these daily diary studies, such that physical and cognitive activity, social engagement, and other health behaviors are associated with better cognitive and physical activities later in life. And I should note that these same kinds of activities, physical activity in particular, are important protective factors for health conditions such as hypertension, diabetes, and other age-related diseases that also affect cognition, which I showed earlier in that set of factors affecting cognitive aging. So the idea here is that many of these same factors matter on a daily basis to optimize health and well-being. And basically being physically active today is related to your cognitive functioning and well-being today. That you're going to see the outcomes today, as well as it's going to matter for later life outcomes, as we've seen in these other longitudinal studies. So, thank you very much.